brave individuals welcomed to Dark Night Scare, the channel that delves deep into the most spine-chilling true stories, ones that will make you question everything you thought you knew about safety, reality, and the darkness lurking just beyond comprehension. Today, we're journeying into the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, a terrain as beautiful as it is terrifying. These aren't just mountains, they serve as ancient witnesses to human darkness, holding secrets buried for generations. What appears as a peaceful wilderness is actually a hunting ground for horrors beyond imagination. The accounts you're about to hear aren't campfire tales or fabricated legends. These are verified stories, real experiences from people who survived, encounters that will shake you to your core. Every narrative is a window into a realm where the boundary between reality and nightmare becomes devastatingly thin. We've meticulously researched and verified every story, ensuring what you're about to hear is as true as it is terrifying. The Appalachian Mountains have a way of guarding their secrets. They've witnessed countless stories within their dense forests, deep valleys, and isolated trails. Some tales are so disturbing they'll haunt you long after this video ends. These mountains don't just hold memories, they hold warnings about the darkness existing in the most unexpected places. Viewer discretion is absolutely necessary. The next hour will take you through 12 of the most disturbing true stories ever recorded in the Appalachian wilderness. Stories of survival, unexplained encounters, human predators, and something potentially worse. They aren't just horror stories, they are accounts of survival that will make you think twice about ever stepping into the wilderness alone. If you're new to verified fears, this is our promise. Every story is true, every account verified, and every experience as real as the terror it brings. We don't sensationalize, we investigate. We don't fabricate, we reveal. Subscribe now because the truth is far more terrifying than any fiction you've ever encountered. Take a deep breath, lock your doors, and prepare yourself for 12 disturbing true Appalachian Mountains horror stories that will prove once and for all that some places are better left unexplored. Our first story transports us to the heart of southern Appalachia, where the mountains are more than a landscape. They are a living, breathing entity holding secrets deeper than the oldest rock formations. This occurred during the summer of 2014, etched terrifyingly in the narrator's memory. Growing up in western North Carolina, just a half hour from Asheville, our storyteller knew these mountains weren't just a place. They were part of his blood. The rolling hills, deep hollows, and dense forests are part of one of Earth's oldest landscapes, with rock formations over 1 billion years old. But such ancient land carries a sense of mystery, an eerie blend of haunting and awe that has shaped the region's folklore for generations. The journey started innocently enough. A road trip with his girlfriend, initially planned to visit her family in Canada, took an unexpected turn when his grandmother fell ill. What was supposed to be a simple detour became a nightmare that would forever change how he viewed the mountains he thought he knew so well. The initial part of their trip was incredible. His girlfriend, experiencing the Appalachian landscape for the first time, was completely awestruck by the rolling hills, endless forests and changing sky colors. They stopped in Buffalo, restocked supplies, and witnessed a breathtaking sunset in Pittsburgh. But crossing into West Virginia brought the true sense of wilderness and isolation settling in. The roads stretched endlessly, weaving through dense, shadowed forests broken only by occasional small towns among miles of unspoiled nature. As darkness fell, they found themselves at a remote gas station, the kind straight out of a horror movie. His girlfriend even joked about it, her nervous laughter barely hiding the unease already creeping in. While refueling, a woman appeared behind him. Something was immediately wrong. She was in her 50s, but something made her seem much older. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, her presence sending an immediate chill down his spine. When he turned to address her, the gas station attendant's reaction proved something far more sinister was at play. The attendant's demeanor changed instantly. Without warning, he grabbed a Savage 110 Savage rifle and began scanning the windows, with a seriousness that sent our narrator's heart racing. The message was clear and chilling. The woman was not alone. She was part of a group living deep in the mountains, associated with mysterious disappearances. Local law enforcement seemed reluctant to investigate. What followed was a night of pure terror. The woman and her group would track them down, attempting to approach their van in the dead of night. Only a loaded handgun and nerves of steel kept them safe from whatever predatory group was hunting them through the mountain wilderness. Years later, the memory remains vivid. The mountains that were once a source of pride and comfort revealed a darkness our narrator could never have imagined. Those wide, empty eyes of the woman at the gas station became a permanent reminder that, in the Appalachian Mountains, nothing is ever quite what it seems. This is more than just a story of survival. It's a warning about the hidden dangers lurking in the most unexpected places, about the thin line between civilization and something far more primitive and terrifying. The mountains have their secrets, and some are better left undiscovered. Our second story takes us deep into the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a landscape promising solitude but delivering something far more terrifying. This is a tale of a solo hiker who sought peace and found something entirely different, an encounter that would shatter his perception of wilderness forever. A few years back, after a rough breakup and a draining job, our narrator decided to spend 2 weeks driving through the Blue Ridge and Smoky Mountains. With nothing but a cooler of food, a tent, and a worn trail map, he set out seeking stillness. Mid-October had settled in, with nights below freezing, and most summer tourists long gone. The trails were quiet, almost too quiet. His plan was simple: park at a gravel turnout, hike a few miles into a remote section just west of Clingman's Dome, set up camp near a creek, and return the next morning. The trail itself was narrow and overgrown, requiring him to push branches aside and climb over fallen trees. He passed no one, not a single soul. The silence was so complete, so unnatural, that it should have been his first warning. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, he reached a clearing beside a creek. The trees formed a tight canopy overhead, and the water ran smooth over mossy rocks. It was exactly what he'd been hoping for. Isolated, shaded, peaceful, he set up his tent, cooled his feet in the creek, and prepared for a night of solitude. As darkness fell, the world around him became absolutely black, his headlamp barely cutting through the intense darkness. Despite being an experienced camper, something felt off that night. He couldn't fall asleep, experiencing a pressure in his chest, a primal instinct telling him something was wrong. And then he heard it, a cough. Not an animal sound, not the forest shifting, but a distinctly human sound somewhere near the trail. When he stepped out of his tent and shone his flashlight, what he saw would haunt him forever. At the edge of the creek, just 10 to 15 ft away, sat a woman. Her back was turned, but something was terribly wrong. Her long hair was tangled, her dress torn on the right side. She sat completely still, looking utterly lost. What terrified him most was her complete lack of response. Despite being directly in his flashlight beam, she didn't move, didn't react, as if she wasn't entirely real. And then, in an instant, she was gone. Completely vanished. Searching the area revealed only bare footprints pressed into the damp earth. Proof that she had been there, but no explanation for her sudden disappearance. The rest of the night was a blur of terror. He packed up his tent in record time, constantly looking over his shoulder. The image of the woman potentially charging out of the trees burned into his mind. When he finally reached park rangers to report what he'd seen, he knew how crazy it would sound. A woman perfectly still, then suddenly gone, like a phantom of the mountains. Years later, the memory remains as vivid as the night it happened. Was she a hallucination born of exhaustion? A ghost haunting these ancient mountains? Or something else entirely? The Appalachian wilderness keeps its secrets close, and some encounters defy all logical explanation. This is more than just a ghost story. It's a chilling reminder that in the depths of these mountains, The line between reality and something beyond our understanding is razor thin. Some places are not meant to be explored. Some silences are not meant to be broken. Our third story delves into a deeply personal investigation of family mystery and mountain folklore. A tale that proves some secrets are better left buried in the shadows of the Appalachian Mountains. This is a story about a fire lookout tower, a grandfather's hidden journals, and an encounter that would challenge everything our narrator thought they knew about family history. About a year and a half ago, our storyteller finally found the courage to go through the belongings of their grandfather, who had passed away 3 years earlier. No one in the family had wanted much of his stuff, but our narrator had inherited most of it. Among the dusty boxes was a stack of old journals that had remained untouched, too painful to explore immediately after his grandfather's death. When they finally mustered the courage to read these journals, what they discovered changed everything. Buried in one of the older notebooks was a series of entries about Rich Mountain Fire Tower that was unlike anything they'd ever seen from their typically calm and steady grandfather. These entries were scattered, almost frantic, a stark contrast to his usual measured writing. The journals described sleepless nights and an overwhelming sense of being watched. The grandfather wrote about footsteps on the stairs in the middle of the night, becoming convinced that something or someone was climbing the tower after dark, stopping just short of entering. He even mentioned being afraid of what might be under the bed, a sentiment completely unlike the brave, unfazed man our narrator had known. Driven by curiosity and a need to understand, our narrator planned a trip to the Rich Mountain Fire Tower. This wasn't just a casual hiking trip. It was a deeply personal mission to uncover the truth behind their grandfather's mysterious and troubling journal entries. The hike itself was beautiful, a typical Appalachian Trail experience in early spring. Cool air, quiet woods, and the endless carpet of trees awakening after winter. When they finally reached the tower and found it empty, there was a sense of both relief and anticipation. They settled in, reading more of the grandfather's journals by headlamp, trying to understand the source of his terror. The first night seemed calm, almost too calm. A sharp metallic thud in the middle of the night, like something hitting the metal stairs, was quickly dismissed as nothing unusual. But as the nights progressed, something began to feel deeply wrong. On the final night, our narrator awoke to find the hatch slightly open, just enough to let in cold air and an overwhelming sense of dread. And then they saw it. Hanging from the ceiling of the fire lookout was a completely black figure. It had the shape of a person, but no discernible details, just a pure black silhouette that vanished the moment they fully registered its presence. But the most chilling detail, the boots our narrator had carefully left outside the hatch were now completely gone, vanished without a possible explanation. The hatch had been latched from the inside, and no animal could have moved so silently. Fleeing the tower barefoot, blistered and terrified, our narrator has since tried to find any explanation. They've searched forums, old trail reports, ranger, logs, and local message boards, but found nothing. No other accounts, no explanations, just silence. The question remains, could this be the same presence that haunted their grandfather decades ago? Or is the mind's ability to fill in blanks more terrifying than any supernatural explanation? This is more than just a ghost story. It's a chilling exploration of inherited fear, of the thin line between family legacy and unexplained terror. In the Appalachian Mountains, some mysteries are passed down through generations, waiting to be confronted. Our fourth story shatters the unspoken code of trust among those who share the trail, revealing the terrifying reality that sometimes the greatest threat comes from those you least expect. This is a tale of 3 friends, the Appalachian Trail, and a night that would change their understanding of wilderness survival forever. It was early October when 3 friends, Ashley, Brooke, and our narrator, set out to tackle a remote stretch of the Appalachian Trail in Southwest Virginia. These weren't novice hikers, but experienced trekkers who had slowly been working their way through the trail, section by section. The first day seemed perfect. Crisp autumn air, leaves turning, barely another soul in sight. They passed only one other hiker who barely acknowledged their presence. adding to the sense of isolation they had sought. As darkness approached, their initial plan to stay at a trail shelter was quickly abandoned. 3 men already occupied the shelter, their intense, unsettling stares making the women immediately uncomfortable. Ashley, in particular, felt something was deeply wrong. They pressed on, finding a hidden clearing far off the beaten path, believing they had escaped any potential threat. The night started like any other camping trip. They set up their tent, cooked a meal, and turned in early. But around 3 a.m., everything changed. Footsteps. Not the random sounds of wildlife, but deliberate, human footsteps moving around their campsite. Both Ashley and Brooke were already awake, their eyes wide with fear. Our narrator reached for the pistol she always carried, sliding out of the tent as quietly as possible. What followed was a night of pure terror. Movement between the trees, figures ducking behind trunks. The realization that they were being stalked, not by animals, but by multiple people with clear predatory intent. The most chilling moment came when our narrator spotted 4 distinct lights down near a creek bed about 50 yards away. 4 figures standing perfectly still, watching. One of them pulled something from his waist, a machete gleaming in the darkness. This was no random encounter. This was a calculated hunt. Ashley's response was immediate and decisive. A warning shot fired into the air, making it clear they were armed and prepared to defend themselves. But the true horror was the realization that these weren't simple robbers or opportunistic criminals. Something darker was at play, a deliberate, sustained pursuit that suggested these predators were hunting for something more sinister than mere material gain. They hiked through the rest of the night, abandoning the trail, moving straight through brush and trees. No path, no direction, just pure survival instinct. The next day, they continued, scratched, bleeding, barely eating. At one point, our narrator caught a glimpse of someone far back in the trees just standing and watching. It wasn't until they finally reached the road and flagged down a truck that they began to feel safe. But the terror wasn't over. In the weeks that followed, they learned that 2 solo hikers had gone missing in the same area. The police claimed the cases weren't connected, but something felt fundamentally wrong. This isn't just a story of a hiking trip gone wrong. It's a chilling testament to the predators that exist in the most isolated places, to the thin veneer of civilization that can disappear in an instant. The Appalachian Trail, a symbol of natural beauty and adventure, revealed its darker side, a place where human hunters can turn the wilderness into their own hunting ground. Some places are not meant to be explored. Some boundaries are not meant to be crossed. And some nights in the mountains hold secrets that are better left in darkness. Our 5th story is a road trip that defies all rational explanation, a journey through the most isolated stretches of West Virginia that would transform from a simple late-night travel into a fight for survival against an unknown threat. What began as a typical nighttime drive quickly became anything but ordinary. Our narrator was used to long drives, especially in an old car without air conditioning that forced most of the journey to happen after dark. This particular night started around 10:30 p.m. with an estimated arrival time close to 5 in the morning. The destination was less important than the journey itself, a drive through one of West Virginia's most remote Appalachian stretches. The road was swallowed in total darkness, broken only occasionally by distant lights from isolated homes perched on distant hills. The solitude was absolute, the silence so complete that it felt like the car itself was an intruder in this unchanging, frozen landscape. It was during one of these stretches that something caught their attention. A sudden intense light like a flashlight beam cutting through the darkness for just a few seconds between the trees. But the true terror began when an urgent need to relieve themselves forced a stop on the side of the road surrounded by dense, menacing forest. In an instant, a man came screaming out of the shadows, a long rifle pointed directly at their chest. The demand was simple and terrifying. Let him into the car or have the car taken by force. Trapped and terrified, our narrator was forced to comply. For the longest 10 minutes of their life, the man kept the rifle trained on them, his gaze wild and bloodshot, more animal than human. He kept glancing nervously at the mirrors, his body coiled tight like a spring ready to snap. The situation escalated dramatically when their headlights revealed a chilling scene. A man lying apparently unconscious in the middle of the road with a car partially hidden in the forest. It was an obvious trap. As they tried to swerve, two men burst from the trees, one opening fire in their direction. What followed was a desperate escape. Driving off the main road onto a narrow, muddy trail, they killed the headlights and sat in complete darkness, hearing a powerful vehicle roar past, seconds away from potentially finding them. The man in their car was clearly running from something or someone far more dangerous. After nearly an hour of tense silence, they dropped the man off in a small town. He disappeared without looking back, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions. When our narrator finally contacted the police, they conducted a thorough investigation, but ultimately the case was closed with no further developments. The most haunting part, the complete uncertainty. Who was the man? What was he running from? What was the true nature of the threat that pursued them through the dark Appalachian night? This is more than just a story of a strange encounter. It's a chilling reminder that in the most isolated places, the line between victim and predator can blur in an instant. The Appalachian Mountains hold secrets that some are willing to kill to protect, and some journeys are better left untaken. Some roads lead to adventure, others lead to nightmare. And in the depths of the Appalachian wilderness, those roads often look exactly the same. Our sixth story takes us to Swords Creek, a small community nestled in the southwestern corner of Virginia, where an unspoken code and a set of rules passed down through generations teach about respecting the mountains and the unknown that dwells within them. Our narrator has lived in this community his entire life, raised with a deep understanding that the Appalachian Mountains are more than just a landscape. They are a living, breathing entity with its own set of laws. His grandfather had always taught him that the mountains demand respect, that there are things in these woods that shouldn't be questioned, only respected. We don't need to understand everything, he would say. We just need to respect them. Story begins in the aftermath of a devastating loss. Reggie, one of his closest friends, had died in a tragic accident, leaving a wound that still felt raw even a year later. On the anniversary of Reggie's death, he and James, the remaining member of their tight-knit trio, gathered to remember their friend, drinking and reminiscing about memories that now felt both precious and painful. It was a warm, early spring night, the kind that feels heavy with unspoken emotions. As they sat on the back patio, something felt off. The narrator's two cats began meowing in a way that was deeply unsettling, a sound that spoke of something fundamentally wrong. After walking James home, a 7-minute walk that would break one of the most fundamental rules about the mountains, something changed. As he returned home, the forest fell into an unnatural silence. And then it happened. A whisper of his name coming from the trees. A voice that sounded exactly like Reggie's. In that moment of vulnerability, grief, and alcohol, he was tempted to step into the trees. Something deep inside was pulling him forward, ready to cross that symbolic threshold between the known world and the mysterious forest. But at the last moment, a lightning bolt of realization stopped him. This couldn't be Reggie. He had been at the funeral. He had seen the body. The days that followed were increasingly terrifying. His cats, normally bold and independent, refused to go near the windows after dark. Something was watching. Something that felt malevolent and patient. The unspoken rules of the mountains had been broken, and now something was coming to collect its due. A seemingly innocent knock at the door would reveal the true extent of the terror. When he checked, no one was there. A text from James confirmed. He was still at work, but the front door stood wide open, a door that had been locked, violated by something unseen. This is more than just a ghost story. It's a profound meditation on the ancient relationship between humans and the wilderness, a reminder that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed. The mountains have their own language, their own justice, and when you break their rules, the price is beyond anything you could imagine. In the Appalachian Mountains, respect is not just a courtesy. It's a matter of survival. The most terrifying monsters are not the ones we can see, but the ones that watch from just beyond our understanding, waiting, always waiting. They never forget. They never forgive. Our seventh story is about trail running, not just as a sport, but as a way of escaping the noise of civilization, a method of finding clarity in the most isolated places. But for some, those isolated places hide more than just peace. Our seventh story is a chilling account of a solo journey through the most remote stretch of the Appalachian Trail, where the line between solitude and stalking becomes terrifyingly thin. Our narrator has been a trail runner for over a decade. What started as short-day hikes in college evolved into multi-day loops and high-elevation passes. Out there, away from the constant buzz of phones and responsibilities, he feels most like himself, not pretending to have his life together, but truly alive. Last spring, he planned a solo trip through the 100-mile wilderness in Maine, a stretch that runs from the town of Monson to just outside Baxter State Park, the most isolated section of the entire Appalachian Trail. The trip was supposed to be simple. 2 nights, 3 days of pure wilderness. He started early around 7 a.m., with the air still holding a bite of cold. Packed with his GPS, enough food and water, and a bear canister, he was prepared for anything, or so he thought. The first day passed with an eerie emptiness. No wildlife, no other hikers, just absolute unbroken silence. By the second day, something began to feel deeply wrong. It started with boot prints, tracks that hadn't been there the day before. They weren't fresh, but recently made, zigzagging in a pattern that made no sense. A candy wrapper caught his attention. Not just any trash, but carefully folded with an almost deliberate precision that sent chills down his spine. The footprints continued, becoming more erratic. Whoever or whatever was making them was walking forward and back, circling, moving in a way that suggested someone who was either lost, drunk, or something far more sinister. Around noon, he heard footsteps, human footsteps about 30 or 40 ft behind him up on a ridge. When he called out, only silence answered. That night, the terror escalated. A candy wrapper appeared on top of his pack, placed deliberately like a calling card from an unseen stalker. Around 3 a.m., he heard movement. Not random forest sounds, but deliberate pacing just outside the firelight. Heavy breathing as if someone was worked up, watching, waiting. The final horror came as he was heading back to his car. A man appeared among the trees, scruffy beard, clothes that looked a decade old, standing perfectly still, watching. When the man raised a gun, our narrator ran like his life depended on it, which it absolutely did. At the ranger station, his report was met with polite but obvious disbelief. They suggested he might have encountered a transient or off-grid hiker, nothing more. But then the online messages started coming in. Other hikers who had experienced similar encounters on that same stretch of trail. A woman who found strange papers with children's names near her tent. Another who was followed for days by someone she never saw but could hear. This is more than just a hiking horror story. It's evidence of something darker existing in the most isolated places of the Appalachian Trail. Something that stalks, that watches, that leaves deliberate signs of its presence. A predator that moves in the spaces between civilization and wilderness, hunting in plain sight. Some trails are meant to be explored, some are meant to be avoided, and some hunters are not the kind you can see coming until it's too late. Our 8th story explores a place in this world that carries generational trauma, landscapes that remember long after humans have forgotten. Our 8th story is a haunting exploration of a family's connection to a forgotten corner of the Appalachian Mountains, a place where the line between memory and haunting becomes devastatingly blurred. Born in Wyoming County, West Virginia, our narrator comes from a part of the world most people don't even know exists. No hospitals, no Walmart, not even a traffic light. This is a forgotten stretch of the Appalachian landscape, a place you don't come to unless you absolutely have to, and even then you don't stay long. At 23, our narrator left, believing they had escaped the mountain's grip, but some routes run deeper than any road can carry you. The trip back began with a tragedy, an uncle's sudden death that required sorting through his belongings. It was the middle of January, a cold so deep it seemed to freeze not just the ground, but time itself. The drive from Welch to War is never pleasant. Narrow roads, blind curves, old coal trucks barreling around like they own the place. But it's more than the physical landscape that's oppressive. It's the feeling that the mountains are actively swallowing you with each mile. The uncle's house was a sagging structure at the base of a ridge, surrounded by rusting cars and stripped appliances. A hoarder in the truest sense, he had filled every inch of space with junk. A man who couldn't stand the silence. Our narrator understood this more than they wanted to admit. The silence was the first warning. It wasn't just quiet, it was a silence that pressed into the eardrums, making you hear the blood in your own veins. No distant traffic, no neighbors, just the wind through trees and the occasional crack of something shifting in the woods. And those woods, they felt alive. Not in some mystical enchanted forest way, but alive, like something was watching, waiting, breathing. A hike up to an old logging road became the moment everything changed. About a mile up, our narrator found a clearing where the ridge dropped off, offering a view of the entire hollow. The house looked like a mere speck, the road to town barely visible. But something was wrong. The woods seemed to be leaning toward them, a sensation impossible to explain, but impossible to ignore. And then they saw it. Footprints in the soft leaf-covered dirt. Not fresh, but recent enough to hold their shape. They trailed off toward a steep, overgrown terrain that no one would choose to walk unless absolutely necessary. But it was the figure among the trees that stopped our narrator cold. Deep among the trees, far enough that only a suggestion of shape could be made out, something or someone was standing perfectly still, shadowed between two tree trunks, where the light didn't quite reach. No movement, not even the sway of shifting weight. But our narrator knew with absolute certainty that it was looking directly at them. What followed was more than just fear. It was a strange sense of recognition, something old, unsettling, yet strangely comforting. Like this presence was familiar, something they had grown up with. Without calling out or trying to rationalize what they were seeing, our narrator ran. They didn't look back. They didn't want to know if it moved. When they later asked their older brother about the experience, he mentioned something their grandmother had once named, but refused to elaborate further. Years have passed, but the dream remains constant, a recurring vision of that trail, of that presence lingering just beyond understanding. Their grandmother's words echo through time. You don't need ghosts when you have the mountains. They'll eat you just the same. This is more than a ghost story. It's a profound meditation on inheritance, of land, of memory, of the dark spaces between what we know and what we fear. In the Appalachian Mountains, some presences are passed down through blood, waiting to be acknowledged. Some places don't let you leave. Some memories don't fade. And some watchers have been waiting far longer than we can comprehend. Our ninth story begins with a simple desire for peace, only to descend into a nightmare that defies all rational explanation. Our ninth story is a chilling account of a solo hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains that would reveal the terrifying reality lurking just beneath the surface of what seemed like an idyllic wilderness. Early spring had always been a time of renewal for our narrator, a nature lover from Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. To them, the real new year doesn't begin in January, but when everything starts growing, blooming, coming back to life. This year's adventure was supposed to be simple. 3 days of complete immersion in nature, completely off the grid. The first 2 days passed peacefully. Our narrator knew the area well, confident enough to explore less traveled routes where true solitude still existed. Places where you could go hours, sometimes days, without seeing another soul. They returned to a secluded clearing from a previous trip. Two open spaces separated by a small, still water pond, surrounded by shade and silence. But on the third day, everything changed. While gathering wood for a campfire, something caught their eye, partially hidden in the undergrowth. What began as a casual exploration turned into a moment of pure primal terror. A skull badly decayed and covered in moss. A few feet ahead, a long bone that was unmistakably human, a tibia that sent chills down their spine. The timing made the discovery even more unsettling. The night before, they had been watching downloaded videos about local folklore and serial killers who had operated in these mountain regions. The combination of those videos and the sudden discovery of human remains created a mental cocktail of pure paralyzing fear. As night fell, the forest came alive with sounds that defied explanation. Around 11 p.m., footsteps and movement in the bushes began to echo through the campsite. Then came the violent thrashing from the direction of the pond. Frantic human-like sounds that suggested pure panic or struggle. The moment of true horror came when our narrator stepped outside the tent and saw something that would be forever burned into their memory. In the pale moonlight, a completely naked man was running wildly through the trees. It was a sight so bizarre, so disturbing that it seemed almost comical if not for the absolute terror of the moment. But the strangeness didn't end there. The food bag, carefully hung away from the campsite, was torn apart, but not in a way consistent with animal attacks. No claw marks, no typical bear destruction, just a deliberate, almost methodical destruction that suggested something far more sinister. What followed was a panicked escape, driving away from the campsite as quickly as possible, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A call to the police yielded little results, with the focus primarily on the human remains discovered. Months later, a chance encounter on Reddit provided the most shocking twist. Another camper named Derek had been at the same pond on the same night. His story revealed a perfectly logical explanation. He had been swimming when a bear began destroying his clothes, forcing him to run naked through the forest. What began as a terrifying encounter of potential murder and supernatural horror became an incredible story of misunderstanding. A testament to how perception can transform the most mundane situation into a nightmare. This is more than just a story of a camping trip gone wrong. It's a chilling reminder that in the Appalachian Mountains, reality is often stranger than fiction. Sometimes the most horrifying monsters are the ones created by our own imagination, lurking in the spaces between what we see and what we think we know. In these mountains, nothing is ever quite as it seems, and sometimes the truth is far more surprising than the horror we imagine. Our 10th story begins so casually that you could never anticipate the nightmare that's about to unfold. Our 10th story is a chilling account of a seemingly routine night drive that would become a terrifying game of survival through the darkest heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where the line between traveler and prey becomes devastatingly thin. It was a little past 3 in the morning, and our narrator was driving home after a long night shift at a warehouse near an old strip mine in Man, West Virginia. These were roads less traveled, a stretch of highway between an old mining facility and a small neighborhood that saw almost no traffic, especially midweek. Exhaustion hung heavy, with black coffee and muscle memory being the only things keeping him alert. What caught his eye initially seemed unremarkable, a figure standing just off the shoulder of the road. At first, he thought it was a deer, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a young man. Hoodie pulled up, hands stuffed in his pockets, face angled down as if trying to avoid being seen. Against every better instinct, our narrator made a decision that would change everything. He pulled over and offered the hitchhiker a ride. The young man was unremarkable in most ways. He gave a name, though our narrator would later be unable to recall it, and asked to be dropped off somewhere south. His voice was flat, his demeanor distant. He sat stiffly, holding a beat-up backpack close to his chest, looking like someone who had seen more hardship than his years should allow. But as the miles passed, subtle details began to paint a more disturbing picture. The hitchhiker's boots were caked with dried mud, not the kind from hiking trails, but something darker, more ominous. His jeans were stained with what looked like more than just dirt. dark patterns near the knees and thighs that suggested something far more sinister. A roadblock would prove to be the turning point. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing, officers checking IDs. The hitchhiker tensed visibly when an officer approached. When asked his name, he gave a different one than he had told our narrator, a detail that immediately set alarm bells ringing. The officer's words would send our narrator's spine chilling. Bodies had been found, creating an atmosphere in the car that shifted instantly. The hitchhiker's demeanor changed, his entire body, language shifting to something more predatory, more dangerous. A sudden message on the hitchhiker's phone triggered an explosive reaction. He demanded to be let out of the car immediately, becoming increasingly aggressive. Our narrator pulled over and the young man disappeared into the darkness. Attempting to report the encounter proved futile. The police seemed to have no record of any bodies, no investigation, nothing. It was as if the entire encounter had been a fever dream. The only proof, a patch of dirt left on the passenger seat of the car. Years later, the encounter remains an unsolved mystery. No news stories, no follow-up, no explanation, just silence, and the lingering question of what truly happened that night on the dark Appalachian highway. This is more than just a story of a strange hitchhiker. It's a chilling reminder that the most dangerous predators often look the most ordinary. In the Appalachian Mountains, darkness takes many forms, and sometimes it hitches a ride right beside you. Some encounters are best left on the side of the road. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. And in these mountains, what remains unspoken is often far more terrifying than what is said. Our 11th story illustrates the lengths a parent will go to protect their child, revealing the most terrifying predators lurk not in the shadows of the wilderness, but in plain sight. Claire and her husband were passionate hikers, lovers of the raw, unforgiving connection with nature that feels both threatening and purifying. Before their daughter Leah was born, they had explored several stretches of the Appalachian Mountains, from the popular trails of North Carolina to the dense remote paths of West Virginia. But parenthood had temporarily paused their adventures until now. After their daughter's first birthday, they felt ready to return to the trails. They chose the Rhododendron Highlands, a section known for its remoteness and almost unreal beauty. They weren't interested in busy, safe trails. They wanted that pure, solitary connection to the forest, far from crowded paths and occasional hiking families. The first couple of days passed uneventfully. They crossed paths with a few other hikers, most offering quick, friendly hellos, but one couple stood out. A woman with curly red hair and a dirty straw hat, and a man who was tall, skinny, with a scruffy beard and eyes that seemed perpetually on edge. Their questions were oddly specific. How long they'd been out there, whether their daughter slept well in the tent, if they were afraid of wild animals. The woman's behavior was particularly unsettling. She reached out as if to hold Leah, an attempt Claire instinctively blocked. It was one of those moments where everything seems normal, but something feels fundamentally wrong. A tension in the air that spoke of danger lurking just beneath the surface. On the third night, they set up camp in a small clearing, about 500 off the main trail. Hidden among tall trees and a bed of moss that seemed to absorb every sound, it appeared perfect. But when they stepped out of the tent the next morning, everything had changed. The ground was covered in human footprints, multiple sets that had walked around their campsite during the night. But what truly terrified them was the disappearance of Leah's personal items. Her bottle, her silicone plate, her colorful utensils, all gone. The food remained untouched, but these specific items had been deliberately taken. Claire was convinced it had been the couple they had encountered, a theory that filled her with primal, maternal terror. Their next night became a war of survival. They took shifts watching with Claire insisting on taking the first watch. The horror reached its peak when Claire woke her husband, claiming someone was standing in a thick patch of vegetation just beyond their firelight. When he investigated, only silence greeted him, but later, the unthinkable happened. The woman from earlier was suddenly in their tent, pointing their own gun at them. The man was halfway inside, threatening their entire family. In a desperate move, our narrator threw ash from the fire into her face, knocking the gun away in a moment of pure parental protection. They fled the next morning, reporting everything to the police. Initially, the case was closed due to lack of evidence, but weeks later, they received a chilling update. Another couple had reported a similar incident on the same trail with descriptions, matching the same pair. This is more than just a camping horror story. It's a profound exploration of the predators that exist in the most unexpected places. The Appalachian wilderness became a hunting ground with their family as the prey. Some journeys change you forever. Some forests hold secrets darker than the deepest shadows. And some hunters prey on the most vulnerable, targeting not just individuals, but entire families. In the Appalachian Mountains, the most terrifying predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look just like everyone else. Our final story is about a journey that tests the boundaries of love, survival, and the lengths a parent will go to protect their child, revealing the most terrifying predators lurk not in the shadows of the wilderness, but in plain sight. Our final story is a harrowing account of a family hiking trip that would reveal the most terrifying predators lurk not in the shadows of the wilderness, but in plain sight. Claire and her husband were passionate hikers, lovers of the raw, unforgiving contact with nature that feels simultaneously threatening and purifying. Before their daughter Leah was born, they had explored several stretches of the Appalachian Mountains, from the popular trails of North Carolina to the dense remote paths of West Virginia. But parenthood had temporarily paused their adventures until now. After their daughter's first birthday, they felt ready to return to the trails. They chose the rhododendron highlands, a section known for its remoteness and almost unreal beauty. They weren't interested in busy, safe trails. They wanted that pure, solitary connection to the forest, far from crowded paths and occasional hiking families. The first couple of days passed uneventfully. They crossed paths with a few other hikers, most offering quick, friendly hellos, but one couple stood out. A woman with curly red hair and a dirty straw hat, and a man who was tall, skinny, with a scruffy beard and eyes that seemed perpetually on edge. Their questions were oddly specific. How long they'd been out there, whether their daughter slept well in the tent, if they were afraid of wild animals. The woman's behavior was particularly unsettling. She reached out as if to hold Leah, an attempt Claire instinctively blocked. It was one of those moments where everything seems normal, but something feels fundamentally wrong. A tension in the air that spoke of danger lurking just beneath the surface. On the third night, they set up camp in a small clearing, about 500 off the main trail. Hidden among tall trees and a bed of moss that seemed to absorb every sound, it appeared perfect. But when they stepped out of the tent the next morning, everything had changed. The ground was covered in human footprints, multiple sets that had walked around their campsite during the night. But what truly terrified them was the disappearance of Leah's personal items. Her bottle, her silicone plate, her colorful utensils, all gone. The food remained untouched, but these specific items had been deliberately taken. Claire was convinced it had been the couple they had encountered, a theory that filled her with primal, maternal terror. Their next night became a war of survival. They took shifts watching with Claire insisting on taking the first watch. The horror reached its peak when Claire woke her husband, claiming someone was standing in a thick patch of vegetation just beyond their firelight. When he investigated, only silence answered. But moments later, the unthinkable happened. The woman from earlier was suddenly in their tent, pointing their own gun at them. The man was halfway inside, threatening their entire family. In a desperate move, our narrator threw ash from the fire into her face, knocking the gun away in a moment of pure parental protection. They fled the next morning, reporting everything to the police. Initially, the case was closed due to lack of evidence, but weeks later, they received a chilling update. Another couple had reported a similar incident on the same trail with descriptions, matching the same pair. This is more than just a camping horror story. It's a profound exploration of the predators that exist in the most unexpected places. The Appalachian wilderness became a hunting ground with their family as the prey. Some journeys change you forever. Some forests hold secrets darker than the deepest shadows. And some hunters prey on the most vulnerable, targeting not just individuals, but entire families. In the Appalachian Mountains, the most terrifying predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look just like everyone else.